Now, I'm sure the vast majority of people in this audience today know who Amadeus is, but just in case there are a few people that don't, perhaps, Emma, you can start by just giving them a quick overview of the business that you work in and your role within that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here, even if it is only virtual. So as you say, I'm sure many people know of Amadeus, but are maybe not too clear on what we do. So happy to oblige. So basically, we're a technology company. So one of the leading software companies in the world dedicated to the global travel industry. So we have a whole host of products and services which serve all of the key players in the travel ecosystem. And when I talk about travel ecosystem, I mean everyone from travel sellers, travel agents, through to airports, airlines, and covering hospitality and payments on the way. So the mission of the company is basically to power better journeys through travel tech. Yeah. Within Amadeus, I'm global head of customer engagement and acquisition. So I sit within the global marketing team and focus on engagement and acquisition of customers through digital channels. So my team specifically leads the execution of end-to-end demand gen campaigns covering the whole end-to-end journey. So we focus on activities across the whole funnel. Top of the funnel, anything related to paid media, search engine optimization. So we identify and drive relevant audiences to our ecosystem. Then we've got the middle of the funnel where we identify those audiences and recruit them to the relevant qualification and nurturing tracks, so that once the contacts are qualified as leads, we can then hand them over to sales as marketing qualified leads, so they can handle them through the bottom of the funnel. Besides all of the campaign side, which is most exciting stuff, we're also the business owners of the back-end platforms. So a key part of that is to ensure that the data is being handled in the best possible way and flowing between all of the different systems that we've integrated into the digital ecosystem. So we've just recruited a new team member in that sense to take ownership of these data flows and keep enhancing the quality and richness of the customer data that we're gathering.
Excellent. Well, that's very interesting, a very interesting role, Emma. So, as you said, you're responsible for demand gen. Amadeus as a tech company within the travel and transportation sort of industry and where it sits. Clearly, everybody's had a really tough time over the last 18 months, but particularly in your space. How has that really sort of impacted what you and your team have been having to do then in terms of, getting to reach out to these B2B audiences that you're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a valid point. It's been a really complicated time in the travel industry. And I mean, we've had to be very sensitive in our marketing content and strategies, how and where we're reaching out to our customers through this time. So basically, our customers' priorities and decision-making process has changed over the past year, and we've needed to take that into account in our marketing plans. But I think I'd highlight a couple of shifts that I consider as key that have happened during 2020, and we're seeing are still taking place over this time as well. So firstly, we rapidly adapted our content strategy. So in an extremely volatile environment with changes every day, government announcements, policy changes, everything happening all at once. So the different teams across Amadeus, from communication through to marketing, really had to think on their feet, right? So we played a lot more on our brand positioning and our thought leadership as one of the key industry players, that we could be there to reassure our audiences through these uncertain times. So at the beginning, we created a range of COVID-19 specific content in multiple formats within the first few weeks of the pandemic. So we tracked the customer engagement KPIs to make sure we were aligned with what our customers were looking for. Then towards the end of the year, we started communicating as well about a specific concept of safe travel. So across all of the industry stakeholders, using the most successful formats and tactics that we'd already seen working during the first phase. So that was a kind of the shift in our content strategy. Then the second shift I wanted to look at was really regarding the target audience and campaign objectives. So previously, we'd focused a lot on demand gen and filling the sales funnel. And we saw the need to shift towards more nurturing the relationship with our existing customers. So we took focus off the MQL generation and shifted direct response lead gen campaigns more towards those nurturing campaigns. So with the content that we crafted to appeal to this wider audience within the decision-making groups as well. There was a recent report, I think, from Forrester on the future of B2B marketing, which showed the fact that decision-making units not only expanded in size, so from an average of 4, we suddenly doubled that to 6, 7, 8 stakeholders making decisions, but also the seniority of the people making those buying decisions increased, because obviously investing in any new tech or keeping up to date on what is going on was more relevant to a wider group of personas than we'd originally been looking at. So we needed to take this into account, both to identify those audiences and craft our messages to them. So that's why I think the persona identification on our database has been a key, and is going to be even more important moving forward for all of our campaign strategies.
Very interesting, and it's interesting to see how you led it from a more empathetic approach, but in a more practical sense of what that meant from that, safe travel, etc. Very interesting. So the one bit I was going to add, and I'll ask on top of what you just said there, is, we've clearly got more decision makers involved, more risk averse organisations, etc. How did you cope with the challenge that a lot of these decision makers were, for the vast majority, and even to this day, are still working from home? How did you manage that, and what impact did that have on your channel mix, for example?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I think basically digital channels already formed an important part of marketing strategy, right? So you don't care really where your customers are sat, whether they're in their car, whether in their office, whether they're at home, or where. The channels that we used there, the techniques we used, didn't really change that much. What's changed was more the weighting of those different avenues within that. So maybe the change I'd highlight more would be the shift away from paid channels, obviously, and much more of a focus on our organic search and our own channels within that mix. So I think there are 3 main areas which really gained importance over the past months in our marketing mix, and I see that prioritization being carried over as well as learnings for the rest of the years as well, even when we get back into this new normal we're all talking about, right? So the first one, I think, is the rise in importance of SEO. I mean, before we'd always kind of tagged it on as an afterthought. If we have time to do SEO, then we'll do it. But, we want the more immediate short-term results. But we managed to get SEO onto our marketing plans and into the development roadmap. So we saw many more requests coming in through our internal systems to optimize content to help generate more organic traffic. So as the paid media dropped off, we really saw this user-triggered search turning into a priority last year. And I think it will, as I say, be a priority moving forward as well. The second practice we leverage more would be that use of more automated campaigns based on user triggers. So instead of pushing our content out, the typical newsletters and e-blasts, we'd wait for the customers to show signs of being ready to move along our content track. So that links back to that more sensitive way of bringing our messages to the audience, right? So we gradually are managing to move away, and it's an ongoing process, from that e-blast approach and more towards the strategic, always on, always relevant type campaigns based on user behavior. So this really is supported by that shifting content strategy I mentioned before. And we focus on the customer triggers, customer profiles to define the campaigns that make our messaging much more relevant and increase that engagement. So the final area, which I think is important to highlight, would be, and it's one of the key ones, which everyone will have seen, including this one, is the move from offline events to the online and virtual events. So internally, we've been leveraging virtual events as demand generation and engagement content, and seeing it more as a content strategy than an event strategy in that sense. So we see that events are now beginning to form part of that strategic content strategy. We've integrated our webinar platforms with our marketing database, so that now we've got webinar and event engagement forming part of that lead nurturing and lead scoring strategies moving forward. So again, just to summarize, I think it's the search engine optimization, the more automated campaigns, and that move towards the virtual events to form part of a lead nurturing strategy.
Excellent. Sounds a very thorough sort of approach in the way you adapt to the situation, Emma. So it's great. Now I'm just going to come back to the event that we're here. So I'm assuming that the audience have seen Mr. Ritson and his little spiel a little earlier on. But one of the points that Mark sort of broke during his speech was he was talking about marketing intelligence, which is a bit of an oxymoron, one would say, for people who are not in marketing, isn't it? But what he was sort of saying is it's got to be used in sort of an appropriate context to have a sort of a positive impact. Given the sort of role that you've got on your team, feeding that sort of whole sales organization at Amadeus, how have you sort of applied sort of the intelligence assets and sort of capabilities, and how you sort of making that information flow, and what are you doing with it, and what's the sort of potential for the future?
Again, that is a great question. I mean, I totally agree with Mark's statement as well. So a metric or a piece of data is just a number unless you've actually got some context behind it. So, I mean, that context can be a benchmark, an insight, or even specific progress towards a specific business goal, but it's got to have some context to make it actionable, right? So regarding data and how we're bringing that together, I think the biggest challenge any organization has today is operationalizing customer intelligence or implementing artificial intelligence. It's because that data is so dispersed across platforms, teams, and technologies. So the key challenge is, first of all, identifying that data and then structuring it so that you can make sure that it's there in order to get the insights. And getting the insights can either be by human means initially or as a next step by AI. And I think that's key, right? But there's a lot of housekeeping which needs doing before that full potential of AI and CI can be reached. So my team has been concentrating in this past year on doing this housekeeping. It's not glamorous, but it needs doing, right? So we've been focusing a lot on identifying the data sources, integrating those data sources, and prioritizing the gaps that we found, so that we can then build up a roadmap on how we can bring all of that data in, so we can prepare the way to start extracting the insights that we can now and train future AI to help us leverage all of that data. So in the meantime, if we have opportunity to make quick wins, for instance, with send time optimization on email, matching audience via some of our integrations, or even running small chatbot pilots, then we're making sure to take advantage of this so that we can learn and then scale it out across the rest of the organization, because that's key as well. To scale something out, you have to make it scalable. So it's no use jumping through all the hoops that you can now to have a quick win regarding data if you can't then use that across the organization later, right? So, I mean, where do I see most potential for this at the moment? So I think there's a whole universe of AI still to be discovered. So it's first of all essential to keep an open mind on that level and keep an eye on what's happening out there. That being said, I think the opportunity AI will give us is not just to personalize, but to predict and individualize interactions. So it's going that step beyond the personalization that we currently can do on our tools, but it's identifying those best possible outcomes, the best next step for where organizations can find a lot of value. So I think I was listening to a podcast the other day with Jim Lisinski, who literally wrote the ZMOT book from Google. So he put his finger on the value of AI to deliver this precision at scale, right? So creating that individualized, coherent user journey across all organization on multiple touch points. And I'm not just talking about marketing here, but also product development, administration, operations, everything, so that we can then identify, score, recruit prospects for the best possible nurture campaign with the best messaging. And that will enrich not just the user experience, which is key, as customer centric as we all like to be, but also it can prove the value that I think marketing can bring to the organization in the longer term as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, very insightful, I would say there. Just going a bit more on with the comment that Mark made as well about what you're saying there. Clearly you're talking about the world's our oyster almost as marketers. There's a lot to come down the track, but again, not to get too carried away with just doing something for the sake of it. It has to be contextual. It has to be relevant to the experience you're trying to deliver. I guess one of the comments of Mark's was intelligence irrigation, that ability to actually share this insight. I think you were kind of what I would allude to sort of data democratization, because data in itself is not valuable. It's what decision you take with it, what action you do different, or how do you improve it that makes a difference. So as we sort of go for the nirvana of sort of AI and ML in the sort of short, medium and longer term, how are you sort of making sure that the insights that you're pulling today, as you say, with the team and making sure that all that data has been pulled together into a sort of a consistent platform, how are you making sure that gets out and into the overall end-to-end sales process across marketing and across the sales organization?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a challenge. This brings to mind an anecdote from, again, another ex-Google, Avanish Kaushik, with the whole analytics thing. I mean, he went into a company, turned off all of the 500 reports that were being generated, and nobody complained. So, I mean, it doesn't matter about how many reports you're generating, it's making them actionable. So I totally agree. And I think the key here is to create that culture of continuous learning and best practice sharing. So it doesn't matter how many dashboards or reports you can share. You need to make sure that the internal audience understands those key business questions that you're answering. So with the data you're using and how it can impact their day-to-day decisions, right? What actions can they actually take? So how are we facilitating that intelligence flow from our digital marketing teams and building that intelligence-driven culture? So I've moved from data-driven to intelligence-driven now, right? So yeah. I think, first of all, we're encouraging people to ask the right questions. So as we've said, digital platforms generate so much data, but making it actionable can only happen if you know which questions your stakeholders need to ask. So again, that doesn't matter whether they're in marketing, sales, top management, product development, wherever. You need to guide them towards the insights that your data can give them regarding those key performance indicators, which they should be following in order to achieve their business objectives, right? So generating those next best actions based on the data is key. So it's all basing it on the data. And secondly, apart from the, making sure people start asking the right questions, again, it's not just about how many impressions my ads are receiving, it's actually what is coming after that. Secondly, we're connecting the data across, to start with, our marketing database and our CRM platform. So initially, we need to make sure that we've got an end-to-end visibility, a trackability, a viewability of that data across all of the demand generation activities. So this is the off-platform activity, the on-platform activity, and then passing it through to the CRM, so the sales can actually follow up on that. So we are investing heavily resource-wise in our data quality to make sure that it's the right information we're sending through to sales and marketing, and making it trustworthy, because that's also an issue we've been having in the past, that a lot of times we're seeing sales teams, for instance, needing to validate distribution lists because they just don't trust the data. So it's key to increase that trustworthiness. And then finally, what we're doing is we're using the data in all of our conversations with our business stakeholders. So either to build on the successes or learn from those improvement opportunities, shall we say. We're not going to say mistakes, improvement opportunities. So we have examples of stakeholders, for instance, requesting site revamps, which is a huge project. But after doing that initial analysis with the tools that we have on user behavior, on metrics, on exactly what is happening on page, then actually it's just resulting in a lot more effective and cost-efficient content tweaks, which are having a spectacular impact on on-site conversion. So we don't have to go big to see the impact of this. It's quite easy to find these quick wins. But again, I think, to summarize, this creating the culture of continuous learning and making the information useful is key to sharing that information and having people start requesting it rather than just receiving an email, which you don't know if they're going to open it or not in the end with the report.
No, absolutely. That's a fantastic point. And just to sort of finish up the series of questions, the 20 questions we've been going through there, you said there are sort of quick wins, etc., that can be delivered. Just for the audience here, are there any ones you could pull out of the hat that's specific to how the orchestration platform you've got from Oracle or anything else there has actually helped make that easier to do, more efficient, more effective?
Yeah.
Are there any tidbits you can share with us there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I mentioned before that we've started leveraging much more those possibilities that Eloqua could give us as a marketing automation tool. So previously, a lot of teams in the organization have been using Eloqua basically as an email tool to batch and blast newsletters to their audiences. So that may have some value, but it's very labor intensive and also very hard to prove the value in the short term, right? So what we've been doing is working on three fronts. You say leveraging quick wins, for instance, with the send time optimization capabilities that we have in Eloqua, we've seen a notable uptick in our open rates, and it's extremely simple to implement and then to prove the gains of that. Another thing we're doing is making sure that our user base in Eloqua is becoming more sophisticated. So it's no longer a matter of just executing an email blast, but we're giving them a clear operational framework, a governance and security group access, even based on expertise and the visibility that we have with the labeling possibilities within Eloqua. So we're making sure we're really building up that sophistication of the users themselves in Eloqua so that we can all learn from these best practices and we have the framework we need in order to scale them up, which again is important in a global organization. And finally, one of the key things that we're also using Eloqua to do is to improve the database health. So now we're really looking at leveraging the segmentation possibilities that we can have. We've just been skimming the surface until now. So looking at those automated behavioral triggers, the lead scoring possibilities, we're really doing the housework that we need to do in order to build that data model that we can actually use to serve the needs of the multiple marketing teams and sales platforms we have across the organization. As I say, not just for lead management, but also for preference and subscription management, where making sure we've got the KPI framework in place to measure the engagement with opt-ins versus non-opt-ins, etc. And just integrating, using all the possibilities we can to integrate third-party platforms. So we've had another quick win that we had at the beginning of this year was using the matched audiences with LinkedIn, for instance. So we really saw some great conversion happening there. As well, integrating the lead gen forms on LinkedIn, for instance, we could really optimize our campaigns based on key metrics that we needed to improve. But again, I think I'm still convinced that this journey is nowhere near the end. So we're still keeping our eyes open. I think we've got very exciting times ahead of us for AI and for marketing in general.
Brilliant. Emma, thank you so much. I found that fascinating. I'm sure the rest of the audience has as well. Thank you for your time. And there we go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andy.